Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay, every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Art Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
Hey, this is Tyler Jones, and you're listening to the Element Podcast.
Tonight, I need you by my side. Hold on to me and keep me in the light. And when the shadows get long and the whippoorwill song is so loud that it hurts, I need to be with you tonight so I can stay on the bright side of the earth.
What's happening, all my woods people? Today, before we get started, Casey and I wanted to just kind of inform you guys about the giveaway that we're doing. We haven't really given a lot of details on this because we've been kind of unsure what all of this is going to entail. But we're a little more solidified with what we are going to give away, and that all comes to you via Apple Podcast reviews. So 5-star reviews saying whatever you want to say about us that's good. You have a chance, whether it was from the beginning of time to today. We're going to be giving away and choosing one of those or a few of those, I guess, reviews. KC, what's the gear list look like?
So the gear list is pretty stellar. It's all stuff that we've used and really enjoy. We're going to give away some OnX Premium memberships. We're going to give away some super awesome apparel. Mm-hmm. And one of the big things is going to be one set of Vortex 10x42 Diamondback binoculars.
Baby.
I've been using these for 2 seasons, and man, I love them. Mm-hmm. My wife loves them. She's like, man, things are so clear through binoculars. Like, they are when you get good binoculars.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty sweet little prize. It's unused pair, by the way. It's one we actually haven't ever used. But they're going to be given away to one lucky person who gives us a 5-star review. And here's the thing.
Yep.
There's one other thing on the gear list, but it actually doesn't make the gear list until we reach 300 reviews on iTunes. All right, guys. So y'all need to get on there. Leave us a bunch of reviews. If we get to 300 reviews on iTunes, we're giving away a pretty sweet gift.
Yeah.
It's going to be something that is in the realm of trail cameras.
That's right.
And it's a good one.
So check that review thing. If you've already done a review, we say this every week that we talk about this, but go, steal your mom's phone or whatever and give us a review via her account. You can give as many reviews as you can possibly give. That way you have multiple chances. Just remember your code name that you put in.
That's right.
Because we want to make sure that when we give it away, the first person we try to give it away to gets it. So anything else in regards to this?
We probably need to state that will be announced somewhere near the beginning of deer season, I believe. So you got a little bit of time to that. And remember, guys, if you can do multiple reviews, your percentage of winning goes up pretty high.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that, 1 in 100 odds. Sounds like not great, but it's a whole lot better than playing the lottery. So.
I mean, that's about what you did with the Gila, right?
That's right.
And you won the lottery.
That's right. I won the lottery. We're going to Gila, baby.
It happens, man.
So, yeah, get on there. Leave a couple reviews if you can. We really appreciate it. And we don't do these giveaways just so that we can use you. Like, we appreciate the reviews.
Yep.
And we feel like, that's going to really help us a ton and bringing you more good content. And we appreciate your support. So
yeah,
please
we
do it for
appreciate
us.
that 100,000 download mark that we were able to hit. That's all because of you guys. So thanks, guys. And let's go ahead and get into our normal broadcasting, recording, production thingy here. What's happening, all my woods people? It's a warm one here today. It looks like 110, KC. Is that right?
Ooh, your truck thing's kind of weird.
Yeah, when I idle, it definitely shows a higher temperature. No, it's not 110 here, but it's going to be in the upper 90s, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been pushing like that 98 the last couple of days,
Yeah.
so 100's probably in there in the future for us right quick.
And that doesn't sound too bad until you add in some Gulf humidity, and you literally can't stop sweating. And one thing that you've always said is like, can we just get this sweat to work for us a little bit? If it's not evaporating, then
It's not really doing you any good. If you see the sweat dripping constantly, it's not really helping you a whole lot. So, well.
So I haven't really sweat a whole lot yet this morning. You did a little lift. I'm gonna go get some workout in here in a little bit, and we're working out because it's elk shape time. Like, it's crunch time, dude.
I got kind of fat on my vacation, tell you the truth of the matter.
Damn it, dude.
I know.
Fat, huh?
Well, I feel that way at least. It's
Yeah.
like I need to get my gut back on track. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? Eating
gotcha.
healthy and feeling better.
Yeah.
But
Just crunching it out.
I know.
Dude, so today on the podcast, we've got a previous guest that we have really enjoyed, and we still really enjoy his content. And even after having some conversations with him over the years, we still enjoy this guy. So that's a good thing. But Bill Winke from Midwest Whitetail, he is just like a standard in the deer hunting industry, and one that I'm kind of glad is a standard, as opposed to some people who've been around for a long time won't go away. I like the mess out of Bill, and hey, we're going to talk a lot of things in regards to access, because I've been thinking about it a lot. For one, with the map scouting that I've been doing on some new different properties and that kind of thing. So access is super important, obviously, because if you spook the deer right off the bat going into the hunt, then your hunt is probably going to be pretty boring.
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
So it's a very important thing, and is a topic that we're going to be discussing with Bill. And so we'll get to that in a minute. But first, anything new on the Gila front, man? Because we were just talking about some elk hunting.
Man, the Gila front.
Just forgotten about it?
No, just hype.
Okay.
I mean, at this point, I'm just ready to go hunt.
Me too.
I'm just ready to get in there and chase some elk. I don't know. I've said this before on the podcast, maybe multiple times, but like, there's just so much I can look at this map without like just getting after it.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm just ready to go hunt elk.
Yeah.
Get in there. The three of us just be ready to just put some miles on and just go find a big bull.
Yeah.
We're
going to do it, dude.
Yeah.
Like, there's no doubt
stoked.
in my mind. Like, the closer we get, the more I feel like we are going to have a ridiculous amount of fun.
Hype is the funnest thing.
It's the funnest thing. Like, I've talked about this before, but the anticipation of a hunt is like maybe better than the hunt itself.
Oh yeah,
sometimes.
like how big of a letdown would it be to like say like, oh, you're going hunting in the Gila today, and like you didn't know. I mean, it'd be like,
Right.
yeah, it'd be awesome, but like it's like, man, I would miss out on all these months of just like sitting around thinking about this thing.
That
So,
happened to me one time.
It
actually.
did. Yeah, you're going
My dad-
today and only today.
I said, "Where's my tag?" He said, "It's in your old backpack." And I said, "Okay, well, this says 16 in New Mexico. That's a Gila hunt." And he said, "When is that?" And I said, "It ends today." So it was kind of like could have gone to the Gila that day, but then maybe wouldn't have had any time to hunt. So
Man, how sad.
so sad. But yeah, I'm getting really amped up about that hunt because I don't know. I just feel like at first I was just so like questioning on how is this gonna be? Man, are we gonna like strike out? They say the density is low in this unit, and are we gonna just go in there and have like a boring hunt for 4 days, maybe hear an elk and then, see him but not kill him? And like, is it going to be like one of those weird things where we don't get it done? But the more I think about it, dude, I'm like, KC going to put us on some elk, man.
Ooh.
And the three of us, like you said, are but all trying to probably hold ourselves pretty liable to not being the slowest one on the mountain. And so whoever ends up being that, it's not for the lack of work or whatever.
Well, see, I have a trick. I have done some map scouting, and I know that on flat ground, through open country, you're much faster than I am. But if I put us through some little hidey holes and make us go through thick stuff, I can get through that better than you can. So if at any point in time you get faster than me, I'm just going to take a left and we're going to go through something that's real thick. And I got you.
Like, hey, I'm getting tired, so I'm going to go under some tree limbs.
That's right.
That are like around that 4.5 foot mark. Yeah, you do go. Like, I've noticed that, especially in Texas when we're walking around, you know, like you'll go through something and you'll kind of go under something. I'm like, man, I just feel like it's so much harder for me to go under stuff. But, dude, when you use the word hidey hole, it's like that is so nostalgic 90s for me.
Is it?
That's just a 90s word. I feel
It kind
like.
of is.
And I love it so much. Like I remember growing up at the lodge, my dad's fishing lodge, and we watched a show that came on in the evenings. I think it was called Honey Hole.
Honey Hole TV.
Yeah. And it was Larry and Barry.
Yeah. I remember the opening credit or whatever ended with like Honey Hole, and it was like a sunset with their boat going through the timber and the
it was
lake.
like Lake Fork, you know.
I know.
They used to fish Fork a lot, so like it was such a cool thing. We'd go watch Larry and Barry, you know, from Honey Hole TV, and like all the time, you know, and it just reminds me. We were literally watching it in the kitchen of the lodge on this like 7-inch screen, you know, I mean tiny, you know, TV screen, old screen, and. It's just like it makes me sound so old, but I just love that memory for some reason. But Honey Hole and Hidey Hole are so similar. It reminds me of like the 90s.
I like them both.
And I think it was in print a lot that time, that, you know, during that era or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
But anyway, one thing I'm not trying to get too nostalgic about is the fact that we just hung some trail cameras.
You don't remember that too much?
I don't want to think about it too much. Because like we were talking about at the beginning, the fact of like not stopping sweating and not evaporating sweating. Massive
sweat day. And man, we had such a like different outlook on trail cameras this year, and we still fell into some of our like traditional traps that we have a hard time with. We did do it a lot, I think less time than what we usually do, but we got out there kind of late and it still took a while. And there's just like this point when you get hot enough, you no longer can like bust it to get the cameras out. You're just
it's a slow process.
Drudging through, whatever word is. So, I mean, and we kind of actually talked to Bill about this a little bit, but like at this point in time, we've decided that we're putting out cameras to pretty much be wildlife lovers, like to observe wildlife, see deer because it's cool. But it really, I mean, cameras this time of year haven't helped us.
There's a way and there's a world where we learn certain things that help us, whether we actually know that or not. You know what I mean? I think that there's a world where there are things we learn from trail camera setting in the summertime that help us out. I mean, and I always think of it this way: is like an old hunter guy back in the 80s or 90s that didn't have all the technology we have, that was a good hunter. Sometimes, and that we talk to them on the podcast sometimes, like they cannot explain why or how to do something very well, but they can do it.
Yeah.
They can, when it comes down to like bottom line, killing a deer, killing a big buck, whatever it might be, like they can do it, but they can't explain that to you. And there's a lot of guys, like honestly, there's a lot of guys that have been on tons of podcasts I've seen and in print a lot lately that are in that category still today, where like, they are big buck killers, but like the value that they give to the people who are trying to learn from them is not very much, you know. And that may or may not be their fault, but they're just like the things you learn from experience just allow you to make decisions during a certain day or whatever that allow you to kill a deer, and you can't always explain that. You know, it's like the try hard guy and Tim Tebow, like. Nobody wanted him in the pros, right? But like he also won some national championships and had like a winning season with Denver. Won a playoff game. Like, but nobody thought he could throw the ball at all. Just like there's guys like that, for instance, whether you're a fan or not, that like can just have these things that they can get it done and nobody can really explain it. So. But like, hopefully that's what happens with our summer trail camera setting.
You can kind of point to that in what we did. We go in and we're looking for a place to hang a camera where we think we'll get some pictures of deer over the next month. But on the whole way, we're also talking about like, man, look at these oak trees right here. Or, man, that's a really great pinch or whatever. You're learning these little things that are going to help you later. Like, hey, you know what? There's no orange tape or reflectors in here. No humans have really, I haven't seen an old stand anywhere. Like all that stuff, it's just little bits of knowledge that you can kind of fall back on if you remember it. And that's kind of the hard thing. It's like, I think where people who are good hunters, like there's a situation or I guess a concept where you separate good and great hunters is not like what they do in the stand, but it's like what they can recall from and learn from in the past, you know? And that's why, I mean, there's some young guys who kill big deer, but there's a whole bunch of older guys who kill a whole bunch of big deer. And we're going to talk to one today. Bill has been doing it for a long time. He's not real old by any means. I am not arm wrestling Bill Winke anytime soon. But he's figured it out, man. He knows how to kill big deer, and he's got his process. He's got his way of doing things, but it's not the wrong way. Believe me.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a piece of property that I was pleasantly surprised about that I have recalled and will recall. I think during the season I'll probably go to that piece of property that we got to look at this past week when we were setting trail cameras and finding those good things like lack of stands, which there's no lack of stands on public in Texas a lot of times.
Oh, I thought that in Texas you could only leave a stand up for like 7 days or something like that?
that is the actual rule, but apparently there's no cleaning crews going out and taking them down.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Apparently you can trim all the trees you want too.
I know, even and we're not talking bushes, trees. Yeah.
We saw a nice little clear cut last year that was not done by the state.
No.
Anyway, yeah, I'm pretty excited about that whole thing, and you know, I'm really excited to hear from Bill again here as well, just because, like you said, he's just been doing it so long, and he's killed so many big bucks. And Bill explains things well. He's like I think his schooling is mechanical engineering, so. He's really good at like the why of things working, right? So the why of how his long muscular arm would beat you in an arm wrestling match. Right?
He could tell me the dynamics of that, right?
Yeah, he could tell you it all. Probably.
Well, I think it's a cool thing to see like how his you could call like a scientific mind works towards hunting. Like he's not just going out there with his hair on fire and like chasing deer down. Like he's got a reason behind everything he does. Yeah. And if we can learn a little bit about how to do that and how to kind of employ some of those tactics, I think it will help a lot.
Hopefully. And I'm just hoping that you and I can recall some of the information that he gives us. Like you were talking about earlier, we can recall that when it comes time this season to make some like midday movement into a new area, and we think about access, and we can hopefully.
Well, Tyler, the good thing about podcasts is that they are put into perpetuity on iTunes. Yeah. So anytime we want to go back and listen to this one, we can, and we probably will a couple times.
And you know, we talked to Bill last year. And it was probably around this time, but we actually didn't release that, I think, until October or September, something like that. So if you want to hear some information on like string jump and how to shoot deer in grunt stop situations or, you know, natural situations, whatever it might be, all things like shooting a live target. Bill Winke gave us some good information on that last year. So feel free to go back in the catalog and look last September, October, and get a little more of your Bill Winke fix. But, yeah, I guess at this point it's just time to get into this year's interview with him. What do you think?
Sounds good.
All right, so now on the phone we've got Bill Winke from Midwest Whitetail. What's happening, Bill?
Hey, I'm doing good.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's starting to cool off here in the Midwest, so I'm starting to think a little bit more about fall. When it's 95 degrees, it's hard to get too excited.
Man, you are not lying. It's been pushing 100 here the last few days in Texas, and it is not cooling off yet, so we're waiting on that cold front. So
it was beautiful this morning.
Yeah. Oh, really? So on a day like this, where it kind of is like a small cold front in the summertime, are you seeing more deer movement, or is that more likely as we get closer to the fall?
No, you see that all summer. You know, I mean, it affects the deer too. They do adjust to it, of course. You know, when it's 90 degrees, they don't stop eating, but we do see a higher number of deer coming out into the fields and even earlier in the evenings.
Sure.
When it starts to cool off a little bit. Right after a rain, a lot of times you'll see tons of them, coming out. So it's pretty typical. What you see in the fall is kind of what you see in the summer too. Obviously we see a lot more deer in the summer because they're super visible.
Uh-huh.
We'll see deer now that we'll never see again until this time next year.
Right.
Wow.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Do y'all plan your summer scouting sessions there on your farm according to like these summer cold fronts and cooler days?
Yeah, for sure. And we kind of we try to go every evening once we get to August. It doesn't really matter what the weather is. We just bounce around and try to film, different areas. Obviously, we're looking for soybeans, alfalfa, and clover. Those are the kinds of spots where the deer are more concentrated because of the high protein, but also they're easier to film in those places. So, they will go into the standing corn and eat that a little bit, but it's not, it's more like eating, pastries, versus having a 4-course meal, and they kind of focus on a little bit higher quality foods during the summer.
Yeah, I gotcha. So are there any prospects that you're excited about that you've noticed in your summer scouting?
I think we'll know better here in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
We've only just kind of scratched the surface. So I'd say if you asked me a month from now, I'd have a real good idea for you, but we'll learn a lot in August. And really the real hunt doesn't start for me until after they shed their velvet and they break up their bachelor groups and they head out into their fall or disperse into their fall ranges. Mm-hmm. That's when I really start hunting them down with the trail cameras. Yeah,
so that's an interesting thing that I didn't plan on talking about, but real quick, I wanted to gather your thoughts on this. I mean, the summer range thing is something that we've really noticed here in Texas. I guess it's kind of just come to my attention this year as we discussed our plan on putting trail cameras out this summer in the last couple of weeks, and we talked about the fact that, man, how is it worth it? Is it worth the sweat and the ticks and the water moccasins and everything we go through down here? And because we hunt a lot of public, and in particular, we were going to put these on public land, and it seems that when we've gotten pictures of deer in the summertime, we've only seen like one buck in the fall in that same area, or really hardly at all. So it just kind of seems like they disappear right around that early September to mid-September, probably right around or just slightly after they've shed their velvet. I mean, what are they looking for when they take off and disappear after all summer?
I'm not sure that I know what they're necessarily looking for. I know what they're trying to get away from, and that's the competition.
Gotcha.
Because they do like the bucks like each other during the summer. They'll have bachelor groups and they hang out, and you'll see them even grooming each other, and they're a lot more social. And then the whole antler velvet shedding cycle gets kicked off by rising levels of testosterone. Mm-hmm. So as the days start to get shorter, that triggers, something in their systems it kicks out more testosterone, and then they'll shed their velvet at that point, and then that starts the process of them dispersing and breaking up those bachelor groups. They don't like each other near as much after they go hardhorn as they do when they're still in velvet, just because of that testosterone rising in their systems. So I think, I've read different studies on it. Generally, the assumption is that they go deeper into the cover, but I don't really know if that's true or not. I mean, we just see some bucks that will move a long ways for no apparent reason, during that time. Yeah. So I think it's traditional. Maybe they go back to where they were born. I don't know, but they spread out quite a bit. That's the main thing. The main thing is, just don't be surprised when you don't find them in the same place at the end of September as where you found them at the end of August.
For sure, yeah. So have you ever noticed that like the most dominant buck will just stay in that summer area, or is it just completely random usually?
I mean, I think it's random, but there might be some studies that would show some kind of a pattern there. But, from my experience, it's so discouraging. I just kind of avoid the summer scouting as much as I can. We film on the field too, because that's pretty cool, and we like to use that footage. But some of those deer, that we might film in one field, we might actually find them on the trail camera a mile away. So, but if I didn't have access to a pretty good sized area, or my neighbors, wouldn't tell me that, hey, he's over here or whatever, those deer would just completely fall off the radar. So you spend the summer getting all excited about a certain buck. Man, he's a giant. I can't wait to hunt this deer. And then, after you just never see him again until the next summer.
Yeah.
And, I've had that happen a lot of times. So anyway, my feeling is we do it because it's fun, but we don't do it because we feel like we're actually learning anything during the summer.
Sure.
That kind of kicks in after they break up those bachelor groups and after they disperse, then we get serious.
Yeah. Another thing that's kind of disappointing about that is that, it's you only get a couple months where you feel like you're actually learning stuff about deer. So it's kind of, for somebody who's like a newbie at it, man, don't be discouraged, but that's just the way it is kind of. So,
right. Yeah. I think anywhere from mid-September until about the end of October, that's kind of my learning period.
Gotcha.
And you can hunt in there because you'll find the occasional buck that's on a daylight movement pattern during that time. But that's when you have to put the puzzle together, because you don't want to still be trying to put it together when the hunting gets really serious.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So you were talking about, having access to a particularly large piece of property or even neighboring properties. When did you first get your piece of what you now call your farm, your first piece?
I actually started buying land back in 1995, and it was like a partnership owned piece of land. So it wasn't my farm, but at least it got me in the door. Being able to buy some hunting land, and a lot of times you start out by buying a part with somebody else, and once you get a little bit of money, then you try to move away from that. But so anyway, getting back to that. So that's how I started. That was 95. And the first piece that I bought with my name on it was in 2002. And that was 125 acres, and it's got the house that we live in now was on that 125 acres. So we basically bought it for the house, and I maintained ownership of that partnership property that wasn't too far down the road. And then little by little, you get tired of having partners. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's definitely a good way to get your foot in the door, but it can be pretty frustrating too if you're sharing a piece of land with somebody else, and people don't get along really, really well. Those partnerships can blow up pretty fast. So as soon as I could afford it, I sold that partnership farm and bought some more private, personal land that bordered that 125 that we started on. So 2002, to answer your question, is when I started, and land was really cheap, relatively cheap compared to now back then. So, I scrambled and bought as much as I could. I mean, I went as deep into debt as the bank would let me, and I bought everything I could possibly get my hands on. I'm sure glad I did now. I haven't bought land in a long time. It's pretty expensive now.
Yeah, it's.
I'm not saying that somebody coming up, you still got to do it, but it's a whole different world than when I was putting this together.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's just it's going to continue to rise. So yeah, it's never a better day than today, probably. I mean, at least in the long run. So, so you've been hunting your farm for a number of years now, or parts of it at least, and I know from 2002 to 2019, there's a lot of things you've probably learned. So are there certain areas that you kind of wish you had set up differently in regards to like food placement or encouraging bedding or deer travel or, whatever that might be?
Yeah. So the trickiest part of any property is not so much, where do the deer live, because in the Midwest, especially, and you guys probably see it down there too, because I've hunted Texas a fair amount, but the deer will live any place there's some kind of habitat and food. From a hunting standpoint, you're not really trying to figure out, okay, where are the deer? You're trying to figure out, where do I have an advantage? And so it takes a while to learn a piece of land well enough to figure out, okay, if I come in through this route and I slip into here and I do this, I'm not going to get busted coming in and out. Because on paper, it looks like you can get away with something, and then you know, when you hunt it over the course of 2 or 3 or 4, maybe even more years, you know, you just keep saying, well, this is supposed to work, but it's not working.
Yeah.
You know, so then you finally say, well, wait a minute, you know, why don't I just quit doing that then? So that's the thing I think over the years that maybe I've learned the most on this farm is, you know, how to get in and out of places and what places I can't hunt, you know, without bumping deer. And as a result, a big part of the farm is the sanctuary, just not because I'm hoping to leave a big sanctuary. I'm just leaving it as a sanctuary because it's super hard to hunt, you know, because of the entry and exit. You're just running into deer or it's swirling winds or whatever it might be. Those areas are just so hard to hunt that rather than going in there and educating deer, I just don't hunt those areas at all. So by default, they become sanctuaries.
So those, I guess, in those in certain areas where you've maybe, you know, you wish that it was set up differently, or there's say, for instance, there's a big buck in there that you feel like you have to get creative maybe with your access. You know, that's a kind of an issue that we see a lot of times, I guess, KC and I, that is, we, if we're hunting a tract of public, or KC just bought his first piece of property of his farm, which is it's a very humble 11 acres, but it's a good homestead to start with, you know, and but being that it's small, you know, we have to definitely kind of get creative with our access. So for you, what are the best way, how do you make assumptions on like where a big buck is at the time that you're walking into a stand, just so that you're more confident in your approach, I guess?
Well, I think there's a couple ways you can look at it. You can either try to figure out where he is, or more likely to figure out where he isn't. So like, let's say that maybe that half of the area around you think, well, he could be here, he could be here, he could be here, he could be here. But then there's some places you say, well, he's not going to be here. And there's obvious reasons why. Maybe it's an open field, or it's, you know, your neighbor's backyard, or whatever it is. I mean, you can come up with places where you know he won't be. So I tend to try to really key on the places where you know they're not going to be, and use those as my entry and exit rather than taking risk. And that's why I'm saying, I was like, on paper, you look at it and think, oh, he's going to be bedded up on this ridge, and if I go this way, well, that might be fine, but what about those 3 does that are bedded next to the creek, and they run up in his direction when you bump them, or whatever? You know, I mean, there's so many factors that go into trying to keep the deer from knowing that they're being hunted, that over the course of years of doing it, you become more and more conservative, because at first you feel like you know what's going to happen. You think, well, I know what they're going to do, or, you know. But then the more you hunt, the more you realize that you really don't know. You don't know as much as you thought you knew early. So maybe ignorance is bliss. Maybe you get that grace period, you know, where you just go hunting, you know, and then little by little you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's not right. You know, maybe it's more fun when you don't know what you're doing.
I would have to say you're probably right there.
Yeah, I think that's why guys end up not hunting when they're like much older, because they finally get so conservative. They're like, you know what? I'm just not going to bump deer if I stay on the back porch. So they just stop going.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, the only way not to bump anything is to stay home. But and there's stuff you can do. You know, obviously, like we're talking about. I mean, you can eliminate areas where you know they're not going to be. You utilize those. The other thing that you really need to start tapping into is the normal human activity.
Yep.
So in my area, there's a lot of farming activity. It's pretty easy for me to get away with murder in some spots, you know, because they're used to the farmers coming and going. They're used to the chainsaws. They're used to farm equipment. They're not used to people sneaking around, you know. So sometimes, you know, the bull in the china shop approach is a lot better than sneaking, you know. So you come in with the tractor, or the neighbor, you know, or your cousin or whatever, you know, comes by and runs you in there with the tractor, and he keeps going. You jump off and go get in your tree. If you don't pay any attention to that, you know, they may not even look at the tractor, you know, and they might be 100 yards away bedded, and they don't realize that a guy jumped off the back, you know. So, I mean, there's lots of stuff you can do that takes advantage of normal human activity that's, you know, more creative. Sometimes you can plant screens to sneak behind, you know, stuff like that, where, yeah, I've got a neighbor up the road. He basically has planted hallways of various types of stuff, whether it's cedar trees or miscanthus and, tall growing brush. And he's got these little hallways, and it's pretty cool. So he'll leave his little cabin there, and he'll basically never jump out of that little hallway until he gets to wherever stand or blind he's going to hunt.
That's cool.
That's cool.
I mean, you can get really creative and put a lot of time and money into it and effort, and he has, or you just have to try to be, like you said, more creative and take advantage of, what God has already put in front of you. So yeah, but that is the key. Everybody thinks, I need to be in that spot where all the deer activity is. That's not necessarily right. All you're going to do in a spot like that, if it's not good, is just educate a lot of deer. Because those high activity areas, it's a high risk, high reward kind of a setup, because you've got a lot of reward because potentially a lot of deer could go past, but you got a lot of risk because of the same reason. A lot of deer could go past. So that means if you're not doing it right, you're educating a lot of deer. So I tend to stay away from those kinds of spots, and just hunt more conservative fringe type areas. And I don't hunt public land. I'm hunting my farm, and I think if I was hunting public land, I'd be more aggressive.
Okay.
Because you just don't have control. You can't leave a piece on public land and say, well, I'm just going to stay out of there, and those deer are going to be comfortable, and I can hunt the fringe of it. Well, then the next guy's going to come barging in there.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a whole different game than I have hunted public land over the years when I was younger, and it's a different dynamic, and I just don't have near as much experience with that now, but I'm sure what you guys even do.
Yeah. So, do you ever condition deer for a certain access that you use for a place? So you're going into check trail cameras, reestablishing stands or what have you, and then on the killing day, maybe it's November 4th or 5th or whatever, and you have a predetermined access route that you haven't used all season, but that's the day you're going to use that access because it's the complete surprise to the deer?
I've never gone to that extreme. I know people who drive their four-wheeler all over their farm all the time. And that way they basically feel like, the deer are going to get used to it, and I can use that to get to my stand, whereas, otherwise I might not be able to. And I think there's something to be said for that. Again, you're just matching the normal, non-threatening human activity. I've never gone to the extreme of trying to condition them, to a certain activity. I try to take advantage of the activity that's already out there. I probably just don't have enough time, to do that. I think it makes sense though. And I've even heard people say they put, like an old dirty shirt or something up in their tree stand, or they do different stuff like that, so the deer get used to human odor. It doesn't bother them. And again, I think in certain situations that would work. It just takes a lot of time.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like there is a flaw to that, though, to a certain point. If you're the guy who's like, well, I'm just going to condition the deer to my ATV all year long, well, that's all well and good if everyone around you is driving ATVs too, but those deer are going to go to the soft spot, and if you're doing that and there's 400 acres of sanctuary behind you, the deer are going to condition to your ATV, but they're also going to say, you know what, there's no ATV over there, so I'm just going to go over there and live.
Spend daytime there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I've noticed too is that the deer, once they accept something as non-threatening, they don't even see it like, okay, I need to avoid this area. I think where the problem comes in is when you do it occasionally and they associate threats, like something like you do it only when you're there to hunt them, or you do it, like they know that a four-wheeler here on this farm is safe, but a four-wheeler over here isn't. I mean, they pick up, they're not smart enough to figure that out. They just realize that it's safer, that this is non-threatening and this isn't. I think that's the categories that they look at. And I don't know. I mean, as an example, my neighbor's all over the place on his farm on the four-wheeler. I mean, he's just out there all the time, and there's plenty of deer on his farm. They haven't left there and come over to mine. I mean, I think that they just get used to it. and they think, whatever. So I'm sure the food has more to do with it. The food and the habitat and the water availability has more to do with it than his activity level, because he's conditioned them to the fact that he's not hunting. Anyway, the whole point of it is there's a lot of really creative, cool stuff you can do when you start tapping into what the deer have already accepted as non-threatening.
Right.
Whenever you're plotting out an access like that, and say that it's something that you're starting to employ in the season, is there a certain level or order in which you're worried about alerting a deer's senses? Versus if you're accessing, is it worse for them to see you creeping through the woods, or is it worse for them to smell you at 200 yards, or is there an order to that?
Yeah, I think the worst thing, and you're right. You need to look at that stuff on levels of fear, for example, or levels of scare. So if you put it on human terms, if you were walking down a dark alley and you saw somebody walking towards you, that would be a lot more intimidating to you than if you heard a door close or something, or you heard somebody talking somewhere in one of the rooms, off the side of the alley. So there are certain things that the deer register the same way that we do, is that in a tree. That's worst case scenario. And if they look up and see you and they recognize you for what you are and not just like some weird lump, then that's bad. Yeah. Because that's a spot that they're definitely going to stay away from that for a while. I mean, maybe for the rest of the season. Just depends on the deer. But, if they see you walking along a trail, example, or, a farm road or something like that, people do that. It's not that big of a deal. I just will avoid. It's like probably an hour later they forgot about it. So there's certain levels of danger that you represent to them based on how often they, run into that. So like, again, it's location sensitive. So let's say that you're back in one of your sanctuaries and you leave some human odor on the ground. They come through there and they hit it, 3 or 4 hours later. That's going to raise more suspicion than if they hit it, 50 yards off the edge of your yard. So there's no simple answer to that. The level of the scare is going to dictate how much they change their behavior as a result of it. And normally that's going to be based on, how conflicting it is with their normal life. So, if they're just not used to smelling, seeing, or hearing, or anything, people in a certain area are going to take it a lot more seriously there than they would in a place where they're more used to it. And it could be in their range. I mean, they could make a pretty good sized range, and in certain parts of their range, they're like, yeah, people, fine. But in this part of my range, people, that can't be good. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So
they're not just universally afraid of people. It's situation dependent.
Yeah, makes sense. So, and I've seen you use some kind of a cover that kind of went up like mid thigh or something like that. Maybe when you kind of gotten closer to your approach to your stand. What is it? I mean, what are your thoughts in a situation like that, or do you have like a general? I like to do this in order to be pretty scent free going into these places.
Yeah, and again, it depends on where the deer are likely to come from. So, like an example, if I have to walk through the feeding area to get to my evening stand, and the deer are going to be coming out into that feeding area, I don't want them to smell human odor in the areas where they're going to be as they approach the stand or the blind, or where they're going to be, like if it's in a feeding area, because they're going to react to that very negatively. Whereas there's certain approaches that I take to a blind or a stand where the deer just aren't going to come from that direction. I mean, ideally, that's the way they all are, but it doesn't always work that way. So whenever I'm approaching a blind or a stand from a direction where I don't expect the deer to ever come in, I don't put anything, on my lower body to contain the odors. But I will, on those more sensitive approaches. And I think it's case specific. It's a little bit of a inconvenience to have to carry something with and then put it on, for your final approach. I think the very best thing for people to do if they're really serious about that is just to wear PVC waders.
Yeah.
PVC doesn't really have any odor, and if you wear PVC waders to and from your tree stands, you're probably never going to leave any ground scent.
Might sweat.
They're just hot. Yeah, you're going to sweat. You're going to be uncomfortable.
Go slow, right?
I've done it. Yep, I've done it. I used to hunt in those things just for that reason. And then I had a PVC rain jacket that I would tuck into the waders, and I would duct tape that seam, where the two went in, where the two meshed. And I'd put the hood on, pull it up tight, and then I'd duct tape the sleeve, the sleeve openings or the wrist openings, and I made it just so that no air could get in and out of that suit, and no scent could get in and out, and it really, really worked. I mean, I'm telling you that. Yeah, I mean, you think, well, some of these scent control things that we do, some of them work really well, some of them work okay, some of them don't work at all. But that one was like almost a 100% solution, but super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Bill, if a person was just a casual listener and they heard you say that, they might think you're a crazy person. But with your record, things like that, it shows like the level of detail that you take and what it can actually help you accomplish. And it's cool. And I guess it was just one of those situations where practicality didn't meet, the necessity of the suit. Because, we don't see you doing it that often anymore on Midwest Whitetail. But,
I think I would do it more. I mean, I think that the problem I have now is there's two of us. And
right.
If I was just by myself, I wouldn't carry a backpack. I would have all my stuff in my pockets. I'd have, I could find a way to make that reasonably practical if I was hunting by myself. The hardest part is climbing in, wearing waders, climbing into your tree stand. So you got to be really careful on how you set up. But also they're cold. When it gets really cold outside, you can really freeze inside of that stuff because you sweat and so forth, going in. But anyway, the point is, it really does work well, but there's so many compromises that we make now because there's two people.
Yeah.
And there's only so much I can do to force the guy that's filming me to be as rigorous in this stuff as what I am. So the simple solution now for me is anytime there's a swirling wind or it's a really wind, sensitive or a, whatever you want to call it, we just get into one of those redneck blinds and close all the windows. And then, there's nothing that's for the most part, there's almost no odor that gets out of those. And then we can hunt those more sensitive areas like that rather than, just not hunting them at all.
Yeah.
So that's the one step I've made that I've changed quite a bit with the cameraman and the scent control side is, we can get away with murder in those blinds with the windows closed and everything's sealed up. But when you try to get into a tree stand with two people and all the gear, it's pretty tough to beat most of the deer most of the time. You're going to beat some of the deer some of the time, and there's ways to beat. I shouldn't say you can beat all the deer all the time with certain methods, but you can come pretty close.
Yeah.
But you got to be very extreme. Very extreme.
That's something that I've noticed with Tyler and I hunting as a team most of the time is you both have to really be on the same page on your scent control levels. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what you do if your buddy is walking around in diesel on the ground before he gets in the truck or whatever, And right. I guess sometimes in some situations. With cameraman, you could probably reduce their paycheck, and it would probably incentivize them to to do better. But in this situation, it's more of a friendship thing. So I guess just kind of covering those bases with one another and making things vocalized and just kind of getting on the same page is super important. But do you feel like?
Anyway, before you move on, let me touch on that.
Yeah.
The whole key is you have to be way more extreme than you think to make it work. So it's easy to be super extreme by yourself. It's really hard to be super extreme with two people.
Sure.
So, but the point of it is you can beat most of the deer most of the time, and if you really get super extreme, you can beat almost all the deer all the time. I mean, that's kind of the holy grail is to say, well, they never smell me, and you can get to that extreme, but it's really hard to do that when there's two people.
Yeah.
But it can be done with one person if you're crazy enough to do it.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. This is kind of the crux of what we're talking about here, but I think that through some of your educational stuff that you've done on Midwest Whitetail and stuff, and just general hunting knowledge, like a lot of people understand scent control in a stand, but that's going to differ quite a bit from like the ground scent side of things and access and scent control in that scenario. Can you talk about maybe a little bit of the things that you do for that ground scent control that's a little bit different than what you would use just as a general tree stand setting?
Well, the biggest mistake on ground scent is people think it's where your foot touches the ground. Mm-hmm. It's usually not. There might be a little bit of odor that they pick up there, but that's really not it. It's more about where your pants brush against the low vegetation. Mm-hmm. That's usually where they're picking you up. And so, there's ways you can do it. You can mow paths, you can spray Roundup, you can make trails to and from your tree stands that don't have anything that you touch. That's one extreme. The other extreme is just to wear the waders, because then anything that you brush against, you're not leaving any odors there. So that's where ground scent is really found, is it's not on the ground, it's on the vegetation that your pants are brushing against. And scent is we could really get off topic and really dive into this whole thing, because I've studied this scent stuff a bunch, and it's not anything magical. They're just little molecules, and how do they get there? Mm-hmm. So you start breaking it down into simple terms. You say, well, how did that molecule get there? Well, it's either detached from my clothing or is attached to some of the particles of my clothing. If you take your hunting jacket and you get it backlit, stand in front of a window with the sunlight coming in and shake it so you can see what's going to the ground, you're going to see a bunch of stuff, filtering down to the ground coming off your hunting jacket. Well, when the wind blows, what is that? That stuff is detaching, whatever it is, and it's floating off downwind. So it's not only just your scent; it's also lots of particles of the apparel that you're wearing, or dander, or dust, or whatever that's on there. That stuff all carries your scent too, because now it's been around you and in contact with your clothing, and so even brushing against something that you say, well, I just washed that. But you did that, when you brushed against it, you dislodged a few particles, a few molecules of, different stuff, or even, physical particles from the clothing itself is now, very microscopically attached to that plant. That's what the deer are getting. Mm-hmm. And so the only way to eliminate that is to eliminate the plant, or to eliminate anything, sloughing off. And that's, again, where that PVC comes in, because it doesn't have any surface area to speak of. Like it's super smooth. It's not like there's something going to be ingrained in there that's going to come off. It's just, there's just nothing there. So you just, walk past, nothing peels off it when you touch something, because there's nothing on the outside of that garment. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's just a solid sheet of plastic, basically.
Yeah.
And polyvinyl or whatever it is.
You said you've done a lot of research and investigation into scent, and this is something that's really intriguing to me. I just think it's cool. I love the science behind the stuff we do. But do you feel like that any smell that is just not the normal immediate smell that deer are taking in is off-putting, or do you think that it really takes something that's unnatural? So let me give you an example. Growing up around here, we hunt a lot of places that have cattle, right? So I used to always just kind of do the thing where you step in a cow patty on the way in or whatever, and it's supposed to cover your scent, whatever. It's kind of the old funny hunter thing.
Yep.
But it almost would seem that, say, if I do that and then I walk into a pasture that doesn't have cows in it, even though that's a natural scent, it might be something alerting to a deer where they're like, hey, that's not normally in this area. What's going on? Do you feel like it's that detailed, or is it more like a thing where, hey, that guy smells like Febreze, so maybe I shouldn't be here?
Here's what I think about that. Is that may make them go, that's kind of weird, but it doesn't scare them. Because it still isn't something that they are afraid of.
Yeah.
There's still, the deciding factor is still going to be the human odor that cow pie doesn't mask. And unless you rub the cow pie all the way up to your waist, which probably you aren't. Hopefully you're not rolling in it.
Whatever it takes, Bill. Whatever it takes.
Yeah. and we get off topic on that, and I heard of a guy out in, I don't know if it was Colorado or where, but he would roll in elk wallows.
Yeah, I've
Just
seen
get completely covered in that nasty mud, and then he would just walk right into the herd.
Yeah.
And they didn't pay attention.
You better kill him on the first day if you're doing that, because I don't want to do it.
Don't go home. Don't go home smelling like that. But no, so the cow pie didn't really do that much to help you. Just, again, the part that deer pick up isn't usually the stuff on the bottoms of your feet anyway.
Yeah.
It's everything else that your lower body brushes against. So, I don't think that the cow pie hurt you. I don't think that the deer said, "Oh boy, there's no cows over here." They might have shrugged their little shoulders and said, "I don't know what that's all about," but they didn't get scared, from a cow, because cows can get out, So it's still going to come back to something that they consider threatening. I think if you put something into their environment that that's completely unnatural to them, like, for example, some people will say, "Well, I can use eucalyptus as a cover scent or whatever."
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that affects the deer. I think then they look at it like, "Ooh, wait a minute, this isn't right. I don't know what that stuff is," because they don't like new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If it's something that they understand, maybe in a slightly different location, that's not a big deal. But I don't think you introduce something new that's completely foreign to the deer, because I do believe they see that as, at least initially, as danger, because they haven't figured out what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you do have to watch that. I think there are cover scents out there that probably would, cover human odor, but the deer would still, I believe, react to it.
Yeah. How much attention do you put to the scent in your truck? I feel like I see you using your truck a lot for access, and I don't know, your personal situation, if you have just a hunting truck or if it's the one you use for everyday use. And I just feel like we do a ton of that, of course, because we hunt public land. So you're always driving to your place, right? You can't just hop on the ATV and go. Yep. But I could just see where there's so many foreign scents that could end up in your truck, whether you go to McDonald's or you get gas or whatever 2 days ago and the scent's still in there. How do you circumvent that?
Well, and think about that too from the standpoint of, we were talking about the dust. Go out to your truck when the sunlight's shining in there and slap your hand down on the seat and see what comes up.
Yeah.
There's a cloud of dust. That dust, every one of those little particles of dust has odor. Mm-hmm. So if you sit in your truck, you are getting covered in odor. Not necessarily because of the odor that's in the truck, but because of that stuff that's in your seat. All that dust and stuff. Because every time you sit down, that stuff gets on your clothes. And then the wind blows, or you walk and it falls off. And, people don't think about odor. They think it's like a molecule that comes off their body, but it's not necessarily. It's like anything that moves, anything that comes off your body or comes off your clothing or whatever, they're all going to have some kind of an unnatural odor to them. And a lot of times it's the human odor that's, on those particles. But anyway, so the only way to really do that well is to keep all your outerwear separate, and just wear the thinnest amount. I used to just go totally in my long underwear. Literally, the only thing I'd wear would be my longies, that I'd get to my hunting spot. I'd put everything else, put it all on once I got outside of the truck. But then you got a cameraman. Yeah. In my case, it's like, what am I going to tell him now? You got to come in your longies, and it's like,
let's ride together in our longies.
At a certain point, right? At a certain point in the season, you just say, scrap it. We're just going to play the wind. We're going to, run the ozonics in the tree. We're going to do everything that we can, short of what we should. Mm-hmm. And again, this whole thing only works well if you do everything. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of compromises there, and we get away with a fair amount. I talk about running the ozonics. We've had good success with that in certain situations. But, unless you do everything, you might as well not really do anything. Because, and I shouldn't say that, because there is some benefit to reducing the distance downwind that the deer can smell you. If they can smell you at 250 yards, you're going to impact a greater part of your hunting area than if they can smell you at 100. Mm-hmm. And you say, well, what's the difference? Well, anything you can do to keep your hunting area fresh longer is going to keep the deer moving naturally longer. So you want to do everything that you can, even if it's not 100%. But if you're serious about the 100%, it's a very extreme process. It doesn't have to be a painful process. It just has to be, you have to think through everything.
Right.
And you have to, you can't just say, well, I'm going to do pretty good here, but I'm still going to carry my pack. Well, that's not, no. I mean, you're making a partial solution at best.
Right. So I kind of have a selfish question here. I actually drew a tag in Iowa this year after 5 years of applying. So I've been map scouting quite a bit, and it appears to me that there are a lot more probably like cattle grazing pastures than I kind of thought there would be. Corn, beans, that kind of thing, the regular agriculture that you might see on TV or whatever, and then some CRP, and then there's, especially in the public areas, there's a lot of like big timber draws and ridges and that kind of thing. So is there any way for me to know from an aerial map where mature bucks would bed in certain stages of the season as I look at these maps?
No, I mean, really, when you mention the cattle grazing areas, I mean, that's kind of the overlooked thing in Iowa, from a hunting standpoint. There's some big deer that live in those pasture areas.
Really?
And that most guys won't knock on those doors because they're like, I don't want to hunt around these cows. But, you can have some pretty good success hunting pasture farms. The deer and the cows, they don't get along. It's not like they're hanging out together, but they also, they aren't chasing each other off either.
Right.
So the cows aren't necessarily going to make the deer leave.
What kind of pattern are they on in that situation? Like they're not feeding out there, are they?
No, they would come and go, and they would leave. And
transition.
Usually, if you're in a pasture farm in Iowa, you're not very far from an ag farm.
Yeah.
So it's not like you go mile after mile after mile, and all you have is pasture ground like you do in parts of Nebraska and the Dakotas and stuff like that. You might go half a mile when you come to the next cornfield or less. It's pretty rare anywhere in Iowa to drive more than a half a mile. Oh boy, that'd be a long ways. Quarter of a mile without driving past a bean field or a cornfield or an alfalfa field or something.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that's just I was just thinking about that because I was thinking a lot about I feel like I can find a spot on the map where it's far enough away from an access and things pinch down and look good, whether it be a terrain thing or a habitat thing. But I was also going, okay, well, when I access it, the quickest way to access it may not be, it may be through bedding. And I guess there's just really no way when you're looking at timber to assume where that bedding would be until you just put boots on the ground and scouted it out that way.
No, you can here. I mean, it's different in the South. Like if you get in the Southeast, especially where it's all flat and there's a lot of, plantation ground, where they're harvesting the trees pretty regularly. That country is really hard to figure out because there's, I would call it almost homogeneous, across the landscape. But you get here and you got a lot of terrain features. If there aren't terrain features, it would be corn. So basically flat ground is plowed. There's almost no flat ground with timber on it. So what that tells you then is, okay, we've got some terrain to work with. What are the terrain features that typically where the deer bed? And typically the deer bed on the ridges because they like the high areas. And there's a lot of, you start really looking into how they bed and where they bed and why. Usually they'll bed on the downwind edge of a ridge or a high area and let the wind tell them what's going on behind them, and then they'll let their eyes tell them what's going on in front of them. So that's a real common pattern. So what I use then, almost 100% are the ditches and the creeks, to come and go, because typically you'll walk right past deer down in those ditches and down in those creeks. It's a little bit tougher on public land because you can't take the chainsaw in and clean those out.
Yeah.
But, so the traversing through those can be really rough because, the trees blow down and they get all snagged up in there from the runoff and stuff. But on my farm, I just go through those ditches and with a chainsaw and clean them out, so I can walk through them pretty easily. But that's kind of, those are I would call them like the almost super highways, for the hunter entry and exit routes.
Yeah.
because you can blow right past the bedded deer because you're not walking through them. It's when you have to walk down a ridge. Walking down ridges is not a good idea in this country.
Okay.
Yeah. So you want to stay off those ridges except when you're actually in your stand, because that's where the deer are most of the time. And I wouldn't say that. I'd say when they're moving, when they're traveling in the mornings and the evenings, the bucks are rutting and they're going here to there and they're crossing creeks and they're making scrapes in those bottoms and stuff like that. But typically, that's not where the deer are bedded. Mm-hmm. They're usually bedded up a little bit higher.
Gotcha.
Yeah, gotcha. So, it's funny that you mentioned the creek thing, because that was my next question for you, because it seems like that's something that almost every year I've seen you talk about on Midwest Whitetail, and it's so educational because I feel like besides the size of deer and the amount of agriculture around, we have pretty similar terrain where we live. We don't have quite the drastic hills, but we have a lot of creaky bottoms with some more hardwoods up high. And it's something I would really like to start implementing if I could. Do you always make sure that you're using those creek accesses heading upstream? Because I know that thermals in a creek are going to kind of go with the terrain. So I would imagine that you always want to be heading upstream so that thermal action doesn't push your wind ahead of you.
The thermals are really only a factor when there's very little daytime wind. Mm-hmm. Unless you've got really great elevation changes. I've hunted a fair amount out in the mountains in Colorado, even for whitetails, and you'll get massive elevation changes where you get these downward thermals coming off the mountains and running down through the valleys and pushing everything in front of them. Mm-hmm. But in this kind of country, your elevation change might only be a couple hundred feet. And it takes a pretty still day for that thermal to become the dominant airflow, because the day wind, let's say you got a 8-mile-an-hour wind from the south, that's going to affect everything. That thermal is only going to be a factor if the wind is light and variable. Then you have to play the thermals. The rest of the time, you play the day wind, because there's not enough elevation change for those thermals to be strong. It takes, they gain momentum. Like in the mountains, they gain momentum until they're 25-mile-an-hour thermal, coming down in the morning. It can really be blowing coming off the mountains in the morning and then start, really blowing up, as the day goes on and the sun gets in there. It's not like that here because the elevation changes aren't enough to, for that much movement to take place. You get very subtle thermals. So I never play the thermals except on light and variable wind days, which are probably 2 or 3 or 4 a year at the most.
Yeah, gotcha. Is it worth using a creek access if you've never been there to prep it, or is it going to be a situation where you make too much noise trying to make it through there?
I would scout it first to find out, because you could run into a real snag, going down through some of those. And, if the first time you go through there, it's dark and you're trying to fight down through there and you've never walked it before. And you could run into 50 down trees that you got to climb around. I'm not exaggerating either. It could be a nightmare. It'd be like one of those Spartan challenges, where you got to climb over and under stuff.
Yeah.
So I would definitely pre-scout any of those things. I wouldn't just take my aerial photo and go, "Oh, there's a cool ditch. I'm going to use that." I would make sure.
I got you.
And on private land, you clean them out, and they're just awesome. Then you just drop into those things and just go.
Yeah.
The deer don't even know you're coming and going.
Yeah. What about, so in our country, a lot of times some of the best habitat is along the creeks. So you have deer bedding in super close proximity. Do you worry about that in your situation that you're talking about using creek access, or does it seem like they're bedded further, or is it really that foolproof to where even if there's a deer bedded 10 yards off of, the center of the creek, you're not bumping that deer?
I wouldn't be in the creeks if the deer are bedding next to the creek.
Okay.
So, I used to hunt Kansas quite a bit, and that was all creek country. It was flat ground. The only place there were any trees was around the creeks. Mm-hmm. And the deer bedded in those oxbows right up next to the creeks.
Yeah.
So I never used the creeks for access then, because that's where the deer were at all the time. You might cross the creek someplace, to come in, to sneak in from the backside or whatever. You might cross it, but you never walk up and down it because that's where the deer are. But here it's different because, like I said, the creeks and the ditches are down in the dips and the ditches and the draws, and the deer are typically bedded up on the ridges, that are adjacent to those. You have to look for patterns or for tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
There's never an absolute. You can never say, oh, they're never going to be bedded down here along the creek. There might be some, but the tendency is for the deer to be up on the ridges bedded.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
And that's, you just have to go with tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, there's nothing. But yeah, if they're bedded near the creeks, I would not use the creeks. I would figure out how to sneak in from the back door, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So, this whole concept of access is trying to make it the best you can and get in with minimal intrusion and be, just have a clean slate to hunt with, right? And trying to be foolproof. But I know when hunting big, mature bucks, like that can be different. So when is foolproof really no longer foolproof, in your opinion?
You'll know if you're educating deer. The easiest way to know is if you hunt the spot second time and you don't see deer as much.
Yeah.
Then you know it didn't work, basically, unless the conditions are way different, like it's got really warm or, something has, changed the behavior of the deer. Because I've got spots that I can hunt every single day that the wind is out of the west, for example, and I never have to worry about it because the access is so bulletproof and so foolproof that I continue to see movement. That's the real test. And again, we've talked about, fine-tuning a hunting area over the course of years. And I think it takes, realistically, it takes at least 3 years to have a pretty good feel for how to hunt an area, what stuff you can get away with and what you can't. Because there's certain things you think, well, I got this figured out. On paper, this makes sense. But it just doesn't quite work that way, in the real world. Sometimes it will, and you have to go that route because, you just don't have the benefit of, preseason scouting or those 3 years, of experience. So you have to make those assumptions, and you have to, use the aerial photos, and you have to base your strategies on that. But over the course of time, you'll find that some of that didn't work. And a lot of times you don't really even know why. Maybe it's ground set. Maybe it's something. You just don't know exactly what happened. All you know is the second time and the third time you hunt the spot, it just isn't nearly as good. Or you may be very apparent because you're in there and the deer are like stomping and snorting and stuff. And then you know it didn't work.
Yep. Yeah. Makes sense. Well, Bill, this has been an awesome conversation. I appreciate it. It's been super helpful for me personally as I try to take on your state next year for the first time. And just like KC said earlier, we've got a lot of parallels in the way our country kind of looks to yours here in Northeast Texas. And so it definitely helps us in private and public stuff around here to be able to talk to you about access. And I guess my last question for you, though, is when can we expect some Chasing November?
August 1st.
All right.
So that series, recently I merged, Midwest Whitetail merged with Realtree, the camouflage company.
Okay.
And we created a new company called Realtree Digital. So Realtree Digital, I'm part owner of Realtree Digital, and Realtree Digital owns Midwest Whitetail, Chasing November, Spring Thunder, all the stuff that we were producing before. But we've created a new app, a new platform, video, platform called Realtree 365.
Okay.
Realtree 365. And that's, Chasing November is going to pop up on there, I think at least a week or two prior to when we release it on our other platforms, just to give that new platform a bit of a boost, so that people are more drawn to that. We want people using that more than, there's a lot of problems long-term with YouTube for hunters, and we're trying to find ways to wean, our stuff off YouTube and get people onto something that's going to be more permanent. I'm not saying that YouTube's not a big machine. It's just that there are a lot of agendas there.
Yeah.
When you start looking at, what gets promoted, and now they're like completely anti-gun, like if you have anything with guns, if you even put gun in the description, that it won't ever be promoted, among their videos that they, push out, so there's a lot of long-term problems with YouTube. So we're trying to solve that if we can, step by step by getting that Realtree 365 as being a primary video platform for the outdoors.
Cool.
So, and that's how we're really pushing that. Just, right now, if you go on there, you can watch all the Monster Bucks Volume 1 for free. Realtree Monster Bucks videos.
Sweet.
I did that
Volume
last
1 for
week,
free.
actually. So
Yeah.
I had no idea that you were involved with that, but that's really cool. Like, I was like, wow, Monster Bucks for free? It's all right.
Yeah. So that was one thing we did, is trying to get that launched, draw people's attention to it. And we've had pretty good response from that. It's just a long-term process,
Sure.
of creating of habits. People, they're used to going to YouTube, and I don't blame them. I mean, it's a pretty convenient platform, for watching video. But long-term for hunters, especially, there's going to be problems with YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just taking those steps now so that 5-10 years from now, we're not all shaking our heads thinking, man, what happened?
Yeah. Man, you've always been ahead of the game in the media world. I feel like you just have such good foresight. I feel like,
And yeah, it's just been a gift, I guess, that, I've just been fortunate to kind of know enough people, or to see trends that maybe other people don't see as clearly, whatever. It's just, but this is definitely one that if people will take the time and pop over there to Realtree 365, you can watch the Monster Bucks videos for free. Volume 2 is going to come out, I don't know if it's in another week. I think a week from today, Volume 2 is going to come out. Volume 1 is available on there right now. And then August 1st, then Chasing November will pop up on Realtree 365. It'll run there for either a week or two before we start running it on our other platforms.
Awesome.
So that was a long answer to a short question.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's part of the podcasting world. Is hopefully you get long answers to short questions. But I appreciate that. We'll definitely link to that in the show notes. So if the listeners interested, head on over there, click the link in the show notes. Bill, again, tons of great information. Appreciate what you've done for the hunting community, just being a leader and a good leader, as opposed to some of the other personalities you might see, and then also just the foresight to help take care of hunters like you're talking about with Realtree 365. That's a very important thing, something KC and I have talked about quite a bit, because we currently have a lot of stuff on YouTube as well, and it's a big issue a lot of people are worried about in the outdoor space right now, the fact that you can't shoot a deer with a gun and have much success showing that to people on YouTube. So, but we just appreciate your leadership, and hopefully we'll get to talk to you again the next year or two.
Excellent. Yeah, just let me know, when you want me again, and I'm usually pretty flexible.
Sure.
So, yeah, it's always fun. I mean, I like talking about hunting, so it's just an excuse to spend half an hour talking about hunting.
That's right. Cool, man. Well, we'll talk to you soon. Have a great fall if I don't talk to you before then.
All right. Thanks. Yeah. Good luck to you as you make the trip up to Iowa, and have a good fall yourselves.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
Man, there's just something about Bill Winke that means it almost, no pun intended. I mean, it feels like you're in November. You know what I mean?
know, man.
It's like when you're talking to Bill, it's hunting season. You know what I mean? There's at any chance 200 could walk out, even in this parking lot right here.
That's right, man. Bill, he's just a tactician, and he's like a guy. When he speaks, I'll listen.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He knows his stuff. He's a pleasure to talk to. Just a stand-up dude, man.
Mm-hmm. I sent my dad a link. My dad's the least technologically advanced person in the entire world. I sent him the Chasing November link the other day, which is one of Bill's series on YouTube, and it's awesome. You just heard us kind of talk about it, but
Actually on Realtree 365 now.
Yeah, so a couple places you can get it. But I told my dad, I was like, dude, you need to subscribe, and because my dad was complaining, he's like, well, now the basketball's over, and then football hadn't started. He's like, it's just dead on TV. There's nothing to watch on TV, And I'm like, dude, you have a smart TV, which, by the way, I got it working for them yesterday because they've had it for 2 years and don't know how to work it or whatever. So I was like, dude, you have a smart TV. Put some Midwest Whitetail on and watch it, dude. What is your problem? He's excited about deer hunting, but he don't want to watch it. They don't want to, figure out how to watch it. So anyway, I was like, you need to watch this. And I said, Bill's a really good narrator. And that's one thing I like about that Chasing November series is it takes a little bit of thought and also just a good voice. And everything to just become a good narrator. And I think Bill, being a writer for so long, also makes that. But
Yeah.
it's a good series, man. So it hypes me up. Speaking of YouTube, we have got a lot going on YouTube right now. So if you're like struggling to follow what we're doing now, I'm sorry, but we've been all over the place, literally all over the place. I went on that long vacation that was 4 weeks, and so I'm getting into. By the time this releases, you guys will be able to watch the second leg of that vacation, which is basically from when we left the Gila up to like Northern California area. So there is a huge trout in this video. So so this is the thing. I've talked about the huge trout already, but I looked at the footage, and it's a 9-minute clip of the fight.
That's a big one.
Yeah. So I fought the fish for 9 minutes. Like, that's a long fight, especially in freshwater, you know. A lot of it was just me, like, figuring out what to do with the fish. Like, he was just sitting in a spot, trying to keep from fighting the current, you know. But it was so much fun. And I left a lot of it in there. I know a lot of people, you know, like you were talking about earlier, kind of off the air with Bill, it's like, you know, sometimes there's a lot of flash going on YouTube and this and that. And a lot of people like to cut down these fights like to nothing. And I just think that that's such an important part of like the story of a fish, you know, like when you land a fish, if there wasn't much of a fight, it's kind of like, well, yeah, it's a cool achievement to get that fish to bite and everything, but that's only half of it. Like getting the fish in, I mean, it's tough. The biggest fish from our Montana film last year broke you off, you know? I mean, that's like, it just happens. Like, big fish are going to break you off. So I think the fight is just a big spot of it. And I put a lot of that in there. So, you know, feel free to fast forward through it if you want. But I like that stuff. So it's in there. Also, we have been doing a lot of camo stuff lately. If you listen to last week's podcast, we did a big review of our system. And that was fun. I liked doing that.
Yeah, it was cool.
So.
It was kind of cool to do the video with it. So it's not like, hey, guys, we're talking about things you can't see.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
So, yeah, go watch that, and then you can listen to it, too. If you are driving or whatever, don't watch it. Just listen. You'll kind of understand what's going on.
Yeah, there's opportunity to see what we're actually talking about with the gear. So hopefully that is helpful and informative when you go to make your decision on buying gear. And, man, you know, like we've had some people kind of rib us about, oh, well, you're shooting a 2006 bow, but you've got new Sitka or whatever. And I think if you are pretty rational about it, you understand that, A, you can get that stuff pretty cheap used online, especially considering the quality of gear it is. Mm-hmm. And B, you can you also, you know, understand hopefully that a lot of this stuff was Christmas presents and given to us by certain people. So, you know, we're just lucky to be able to.
We didn't really talk too much about that either. It takes a lot less commitment to have a new piece of Sitka gear, like a jacket, than it does a new bow.
Oh, yeah.
Like, money aside, a new bow is 2 months of work. Mm-hmm. A new Sitka jacket is putting it on.
Yeah.
You know? So, like, I mean, there's been times in my life when I was like, I want a new bow or whatever, but I don't really have the time to, like, get a new setup, right?
Yeah,
so, you know, that's something else to kind of think about there,
Oh, for sure, dude. That's a good point. But anyway, we
that's another podcast,
it's water off our backs, you know, whatever. It doesn't bother me, but I just wanted to kind of put that in perspective for guys that may be like, what? I don't understand this. But, yeah, there's that. And then we also had the pleasure last year at ATA of reviewing getting a review via 3 very experienced and involved individuals of the Fanatic system that Sitka put out. So we released that video. If you're interested in that kind of thing, you're looking to up your camo system or whatever, that's the kind of info that we have. Nobody else has sent us any gear to try out. So we're thankful that at least one company has. And
that's right.
So we'll take it, and that's what we've got. If you want some Realtree, then maybe you can holler at Bill.
Hey, if y'all didn't hear the first part of this here intro, or when we did the intro earlier, remember the giveaway. Mm-hmm. Remember, we're giving away some binoculars, maybe a trail camera if you give us enough reviews. Like, get up on that, right? Yeah. Give us some 5-star reviews on iTunes, or actually Apple Podcasts now.
That's right.
Sorry, they've done away with iTunes supposedly, but give us a review over there. It really helps us out a ton, guys.
Yeah. That's right. Man, is there anything else that you got that you want to talk about?
I mean, I like to talk about all kinds of stuff, but right now I'm kind of ready to get my day going.
Me too, man.
Yeah.
It's is it Gorditas time yet?
I don't think so. No, it's Gila time, bro.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay, elk shape. I got to eat more avocados.
Real quick, you know what? Something I saw the other day. It was a breakdown on how slang becomes a thing.
Yeah.
It starts out where you hear something and you think it's stupid, and then you start using it like satirically, and then you end up using it for real. And that's exactly what I just did. I called you brah, and I hated that for so long, but now it's a part of what I say.
Yeah.
So
it's all right, man. Hey, that just shows you, man, you don't need to be too judgmental, right?
That's right. That's right. Things are cool. You just don't realize they're cool yet.
That's right. That's right. Well, all right, man. Well, God bless you guys. Remember, this is your element.
Living it.
I need to be with you tonight so I can stay on the bright side of the
Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Art Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.